Today we have a very interesting and actually very important discussion, and that is, why is the women's participation in the labor force so low in India? It's a very tough question to answer. But fortunately, we have a scholar here, Deepshika Batheja, to answer that question. She's been studying it. And we have a number of speakers, discussants, who will respond to her. So with that, over to you, Deepshika.
Thank you, Professor Mathur, and thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. I'm going to start my presentation now. So, as Professor Mathur mentioned, I am going to be presenting on factors influencing India's female labor force participation rates. This work that I'm presenting to you is assisted by Devija Samaria, who also works at One Health Trust. So I will start by first showing you the historical trends in the country's FLFPRs. So let me start by actually figure 2 first. It shows the female and male labor force participation rates across rural and urban areas. And as expected, the male labor force participation rates are much higher than the female ones, both in rural and urban areas. So the blue and the gray lines are representing the labor force participation rates of men in rural and urban areas, and if you see, they are quite similar. They are moving together really, and they are almost around 60%. At 58-60% of men seem to be working in the rural and urban areas. But when we look at the same thing for women, we find that more rural women are working than urban women. And so the labor force participation rates of rural women is almost 25-27%. And for urban women, it's been 12-18%. What has been a puzzle to economists is that from the 1970s almost, we have seen a gradual decline in female labor force participation, especially in rural areas. And after the liberalization and privatization in the 90s, this has continued. It's still continued despite opening up of the economy. So if we see the labor force participation rate here in 2000-2004, it was about 33.3% in rural areas. And it has been a constant decline. We have only seen an uptick in recent years, a slight uptick. And when we look at it, in relation to the GDP per capita, we find that so this is a graph that it's a simple graph graphing on x-axis the GDP per capita and on y-axis female labor force participation rates. And we find that as the GDP increases, the female labor force participation rates have actually been on a decline. So as I was mentioning, there has been an increase in in this time where we have seen when we have seen a decline in the female labor force participation in the last 20 years, there has actually been a rise in income. There has been a rise in female literacy, and in this period has also seen a fall in fertility rate among women. So some stylized facts that I have talked about, but I want to reiterate, is that there has been a persistent decline from 1972-73 to 2017-2018, and an uptick from 2017 onwards in female labor force participation rates. The decline has been driven by non-participation of rural women. And between 1987 and 2009, there are 3 parallel trends. There's a widening gap between the number of females graduating and those entering the labor force. There's also been an increase in the proportion of women reporting domestic work as their primary activity. And there has been a rise in earning of male household members because of the increase in GDP. So there's been an increase in growth, and therefore there's been a rise in incomes of male household members. So by comparing the labor force participation status in the 2 consecutive labor surveys, Rohini Pandey et al. Estimate that for the period of from May to August 2018, women are 6 times more likely than men to exit the labor force and 4 times less likely than men to enter the labor force. So it seems that low labor force participation rates are driven by lower retainment as well as non-participation of women. Why do we want women to work in the first place? So we are here to discuss female labor force participation rates, but because women have this double burden of housework and housework and pressure to work outside as well. So why do we want to women to go through this double burden of work? Well, wage work benefits women because it raises their bargaining power and autonomy at home. So there are many studies connecting or linking these two, that earned income brings a lot more decision making about their own well-being and the children's well-being for women. Women's earned income is also crucial for their better health, nutrition, and human capital investments on girl children, and for a delay in early marriage and childbearing for women. If girls and women are working, then parents delay their marriage because there is some economic incentive to also keep them at home. So they delay their marriage. This also delays childbearing. So it just leads to better health and nutrition outcomes. Also, health is costly, and if women are earning income, then they can take care of their own health outcomes. And of course, it is a negative influence on the economy because you're lowering the participation of half of the population by not including women in the workforce. So there could be some potential reasons behind a low and declining female labor force participation rate. And so there are three different spaces. There's a home space, there's a public space, and there's a workplace. So these are the spheres that govern any individual's lives, and there are norms created and enforced in these particular spaces. So there could be some demand and supply side factors. On the demand side, there could be restricted performance of female entrepreneurs and micro enterprises owned by women, which can lead to this kind of statistical discrimination where women are not working, and there's less demand for even giving loans to women to work. In the public space, there could be an absence of political will to support policies or create policies which benefit women and their work. There could be sectoral shifts in the Indian economy leading to more male-friendly jobs. There could be in the workplace, there could be lack of demand for female labor. There could be gender bias in selection, matching, and remuneration. On the supply side, it could be that women are unwilling to work because of the burden of domestic duties. There could be cultural practices like co-residence with parents-in-law who are enforcing patriarchal norms. And there could also be a fall in returns to labor market participation, which could push women out of the labor force. In the public space, women might not find it safe to commute. So there could be crimes against women, and these perceptions of crime against women could be lowering their participation in the labor force. Enforcing, and the families might be thinking about the women's safety and therefore restricting their physical mobility. There are also in the workplace, there could be that women are unable to find their preferred jobs with higher education levels now, because as I mentioned to you, in the last 20 years, women have actually gained a lot in terms of education levels. So if women are getting educated, maybe they prefer better jobs, which are not really available in rural areas. So now I will talk more in detail about these demand and supply side factors. So when we think of demand by firms for women's labor, there could be a lack of demand. So this paper by Fletcher, which I shared with you, in this we find that more than 50% of the out of work labor force women are looking for work. They said that they did not have the skills required to undertake work in their desired fields. So there are more than 50% of the out of work labor force women are looking for work, said that they did not have the skills required. So when they look at the job ads, they do not have the skills. So perhaps there can be some kind of skilling or vocational training to skill these women so that they can actually apply for these jobs more confidently and have the skills to apply for jobs. So in terms of political will, there is a hypothesis that there is an absence of political will. But this is dismissed in the literature because the government of India has improved girls' schooling and worked towards ensuring women's quotas on various schemes. There could be gender bias in selection, matching, and remuneration. There's evidence that willing female non-workers have more difficulty in finding jobs than men. There are gender wage gaps and unexplained gaps, and in fact higher in sectors with a substantial female workforce. So this is also concerning that jobs where the women are employed, there are actually gender wage gaps. There's fall in returns to labor market participation. The increase in returns to home production is higher than the increase in returns to participation in the labor market, even for educated women in rural areas. So I am now telling you about the evidence that we find, and some of the hypotheses we are rejecting because there's no evidence to support it. And wherever there is evidence, I am highlighting them. There's also been a sectoral shift in the Indian economy. There's gendered occupational segregation in India, which has resulted in the concentration of working women in agriculture, manufacturing of food and textiles, and construction. India's economic growth, on the other hand, has been led by the services sector, therefore pushing women out of these of the service industry. Afridi et al. Also find that mechanization of labor-intensive activity in the agriculture, tilling, agricultural work has resulted in more than 22% fall in female employment in the sectors without a proportional increase in their non-farm employment. There's also there's no major occupational diversification in women's employment despite structural shift of the economy from primary to tertiary sector. So this is pointing towards the need to create jobs for women in the service sector industry and potentially even provide skills to women to match the requirements of these service sector jobs. Evidence on the supply side. So there is this concern that women are unwilling to work, but evidence shows that more than 30% of women involved in domestic duties were willing to work. So this is, of course, this varies slightly across different caste, religious, and education groups. There's non-availability of preferred jobs. Women have preferences for non-agricultural jobs in rural and peri-urban areas. The lack of non-agricultural jobs for women may explain the low female labor force participation rates, especially in rural areas. Also, Moore, Pandey, and Prillman evaluate the Skill India initiative and find that female trainees are less likely to both receive job offers and accept those offers after skilling than men. And they are even less likely to accept jobs that require migration. There is enough evidence in the literature from the work of Claudia Golden in the US and others. I mentioned Claudia Golden because today it was announced that she's won a Nobel Prize in economics. So there's enough work that shows that women prefer flexible, less risky jobs which provide both quantity and quality childcare support. So we need to create jobs for women which offer childcare support and also offer them flexibility. And here, if we want women to migrate, it becomes very difficult for them because of the rampant violence against women in India. And we can't really expect women to migrate so easily and seamlessly. So therefore, and there's this cultural norm angle as well. So therefore, this finding is not very surprising. But this does indicate that there is a non-availability of preferred jobs for women. Then there's burden of domestic duties, which really speaks about socio-cultural norms. 90% of those out of the labor force in the NSSO survey stated that domestic duties was their principal activity, and 92% of those said that they were required or needed to do so, while 60% reported that the absence of another household members there was an absence of another household members to perform these tasks. So it does appear that women are withdrawing from the labor force to cater to their domestic responsibilities because they are the primary caregivers in the house, and there's no other person to help or support them in these responsibilities. There are also common cultural practices of patriarchality, which talks about the household structure in India, whereby a married couple lives near or with the husband's parents. So here, Abhik, who's here, Abhik Banerji, is my co-author on this paper, along with Anil Deolalekar. We find that the death of a healthy and co-residing father-in-law increases the daughter-in-law's labor force participation by 11.6 percentage points, which is an increase of 24.3%. and increase in overall autonomy of women by 0.3 standard deviations. So this is a huge finding. This really talks about the fact that as women have this care work responsibility, and living coinciding with parents-in-law can also lead to enforcement of patriarchal norms, which is stemming from residing with the father-in-law. There are also crimes against women, or perception of crime against women, that can also lead to withdrawal of women from the labor force. Chakraborty and Lohavla estimate that a 1 standard deviation increase in sexual crimes per 1,000 women reduces the probability of a woman being employed outside her home by 9.4%. Women also have lesser bargaining power in decision-making to decide about their own participation in the labor force. Finding by Mannat in India, Ghana, and Sri Lanka suggests that returns to capital to female entrepreneurs in the presence of another micro enterprise in the household are lower, likely because the funds were redirected and used by other family members' business. So there's also behavioral theories which suggest that women care less about their own self-interest, and their self-interest is governed by their families and communities. So this also indicates that in the presence of another household member who's also pursuing a business or entrepreneurship, a loan to given to women is likely to be used by the other family members to further their firms and their entrepreneurship. So, and this is all because women have lesser bargaining power in decision-making in a household. So here I want to talk, we can't talk about female labor force participation rate without talking about the U-shaped FLFPR curve hypothesized by Golden, where she talks about the fact that there's a U-shaped relationship between GDP growth rate or income level, economic development, and female labor force participation rates. The fact that it first declines and then rises. So initially, when incomes are low and agriculture is dominant, FLFP is high as women work on family farms. And as production moves to the wider market, FLFP falls because of the social stigma associated with women undertaking manual work away from home. And as women's education improve, better work opportunities become available to them that are more socially acceptable, and they pay well, encouraging women to re-enter the workforce. This has also been seen by availability of call center jobs in India. There was a project in Haryana where availability of call center jobs increased women's labor force participation because they were female-friendly jobs. This was directed to rural Haryana, where sex ratio is adverse and women's nutrition levels and labor force participation levels were very low. So just availability of good quality jobs preferred by women can improve their skills, can improve their nutrition, and can improve their labor force participation and cause them to re-enter the workforce. However, in some developing countries, the creation of desirable jobs has not kept pace with the supply of educated workers. This interacts with social norms, adverse social norms around women's role in domestic production, resulting in an adverse impact on the employment prospects of women. So here, therefore, it seems like India is somewhere here, that our labor force participation was high in the 1970s, and now it has been on a constant decline. So hopefully we will create jobs which will lead to an increase in female labor force participation in the future. But there have to be active steps for that. So gender norms is one area which is being studied now, but which really impacts women's overall health and economic well-being in all spheres of their being. So while true, these barriers are unable to fully explain the decline in countries' FLFPR, the demand and supply side factors that we spoke about, while they do explain some of the decline in female labor force participation, they do not fully explain the gaps. So, however, many of these supply and demand side factors are cross-cutting, and they suggest some deep-rooted reasons at play, such as presence of social norms. The U-shaped economic theories also fall short in explaining the variation in FLFPR between countries at the same stages of development. So as we have spoken, as there has been a discussion on this, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and nearby countries, Sri Lanka, they are probably within the same growth, GDP growth rate as us, and same level of economic development as us. However, their FLFPRs are better than India, and many such countries. So what is it in India which is decreasing or pulling the female labor force participation rates down? So gender norms specific to the Indian space at the home space, public space, and workplace seem to be key to our understanding. So I'm going to talk about some of these gender norms. Of course, there are many gender norms which us as Indians are aware of, but I'll talk about 3 such gender norms which could be impacting women's labor market decisions. There is a disproportionate burden of domestic care responsibilities, which leads to time poverty among women. This discourages women from working or taking up a high-paying job. There has been a rise in male earnings because of the increases in GDP growth rates in India, which has acted as a positive income shock for the households, reducing the labor supply of married female households members. So this has been shown in this broad paper by Agarwal, 2017, that rises in male members in the household leads to a withdrawing of the women from the labor force. Men are also the breadwinners of the family. Gender roles define that men are the primary income earners or put the pressure on men to be the breadwinners of the family. This leads to non-participation of women in the labor market or accepting a low-paying job. There are also backlashes that women face if female employment generates insecurity in male members because of patriarchal norms. There's also a risk of harassment and violence against women that can be reduced by restricting interactions with men. So there's a whole gender, there are norms about women's purity getting diminished because of intermingling with outside men. And if there is a risk of sexual harassment and violence against women, instead of changing gender norms in the society, as a first step, we withdraw women from participating in the labor force or going out of their houses. So there's a restriction on women's physical mobility. The 2011 India Human Development Survey states that a major proportion of Indian women need permission from a family member to even visit the local market or healthcare center. There's a preference for nearby workplaces or avoidance of male-dominated sectors. There's also restricted interaction with business peers and reduced coordination among their female networks. Therefore, when we think of norms, we have to think about how women are going to break away from these norms. It seems quite challenging to change these very sticky norms to now get women to step out and work in participate in the labor market. So a study by Madeline McElway in a garment firm in Uttar Pradesh finds low generalized self-efficacy amongst women that keeps them from persuading their family members despite wanting to work. So as mentioned earlier, 30% of the married women who are not in the workforce in India do have indicated interest in participating in the workforce, but they are not able to convince their family members owing to these norms and owing to low generalized self-efficacy. Now, if we look at the kinds of, when we look at by employment type, then in urban areas, most of the women are working in salaried jobs, followed by self-employment and then casual labor. In rural areas, most women are working in self-employment, in casual labor, and then in salaried jobs, because there are less salaried jobs in rural areas. So if we see from 2017-18 to 2020-21, where there has been an uptick in female labor force participation, where do we really see this across employment types? So women are increasingly joining the workforce as self-employed individuals in both urban and rural areas, while the share of women as salaried workers continues to decline, and so does rural casual labor. So rural casual labor is when women are working as daily wage workers with no job security and no health insurance and no social security, really. So it seems that women don't have preference for such jobs. So these jobs are still declining. The labor force participation for rural casual labor, it has been declining. And for salaried work as well, because as explained, there's a shift which is happening, and there are more service sector jobs which women are not qualified or skilled to apply for. So there's a rise in FLFPR during this period of 2019-2020 when COVID-19 pandemic struck. And so then there has been there's an uptick in female labor force participation in this time, also because there's widely realized in the literature now that there's a counter-cyclical nature of women's work. Women's participation in the workforce often increases during periods of crisis and falls during periods of high growth. So because women are secondary or reserve workers in the labor force, in the families. So when a male member loses their job, and this is seen globally, then women take up short-term employment opportunities. Still, overall, FLFPR stands below, even if we see now in 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021, the labor force participation actually stands below the historical levels. So when we think about marriage market and married women, there are some demand and supply side factors that also play a role, and this is called the case of motherhood wage penalty, which is also studied when we think of women as reserve workers or added workers in the household. There is a lower selection of married women in their reproductive years by firms for jobs, because of women being seen as secondary workers, or they are seen or they are seen in the context of the prevalent cultural norm of women being good wives or good mothers. Then there's a lower perceived competence of working mothers by firms. In the supply side, where mothers are more involved in childbearing, leading to time poverty, so they are not really they don't really have time to participate in the labor market. Educated mothers also invest their skills in providing high quality care to their children for the benefits of the future generation. Now, when we look at this graph shows how new mothers and new fathers fare in comparison to a very close group, matched group of men and women who are at the same socioeconomic, from the same socioeconomic groups. So they've matched, so just to reiterate, they have matched new mothers. So their socioeconomic conditions are matched with other people in the data set. And then their labor force participation rates have been plotted. So as opposed to continuous withdrawal from the labor market, women's participation is marked by transitions as they enter and exit the market. So as explained to you, women often join the market or rejoin the market when their husbands lose their jobs, or when the economy is going through a downfall or a crisis. They also drop out of the labor market during pregnancy and childcare. So therefore, women often go through a transition where they keep entering and exiting the labor force. So this case of this period of pregnancy restricts women's engagement from both supply and demand side, known as motherhood wage penalty, as I explained to you. Ashwini Deshpande finds that new mothers, as I explained to you in this graph, we see that new mothers' trends for labor force participation is parallel to the comparison group, with a large difference of around 3 to 6 percentage points. So this orange line is of the comparison group, and the green line, as we see at the bottom, is of new mothers. So new mothers are doing worse in comparison to women who do not have the pressures of taking care of a newborn child. But in comparison to that, if you see for men possibly get a premium in the labor market as a result of a new child in their family. So the blue line highlights new fathers, and if we see, they have higher labor force participation rates compared to men who are from the same socioeconomic groups but do not have a new child to take care of. So they're actually getting a premium in the labor market. So it's important to also talk about what is being done and what has worked has it worked? Has some of the policies that we have looked at as economists and have seen the impact, whether these various policies have had any impacts. So there have been policies targeting public transportation. Seki and Yamada study the rollout of the Delhi metro system and find that proximity to the metro station significantly increases the female labor force participation rates by offering a safer commute. Providing greater control over resources, financial resources, has also helped. Providing women with individual bank accounts for being primary beneficiaries of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme has also helped. It has led to sizable gains in female financial autonomy. So earlier, the people were paid in either in cash, or the money was from women's own earnings was being directed to their husband's bank accounts. Now, this was an RCT where the authors in Madhya Pradesh, they created bank accounts for women and taught them financial literacy, which led to women gaining financial autonomy and also wanting to work more, now that they had a control over their own earned income. Demel et al. And F. Chams also estimate higher returns to in-kind grants for female entrepreneurs. If there are also there's also some other policies launched by Government of India, and they have introduced employment quotas under various schemes. And they find that such policies are highly correlated with female labor force participation in these sectors. In this case, it was for construction and teaching. Business trainings so we've also talked about the fact that women do need some kind of training, vocational and skilling, to improve their skills needed for the current labor market. This is to overcome the gender gap in education and skills. We find mixed evidence. Some studies find no impact on profits and others find modest effects. So what is the evidence from other countries? What can we really learn from other countries? We find that freeing up women's time or providing daycare centers, childcare centers does help. Barros et al. Finds that winning a lottery for free childcare in Brazil increases the likelihood that a mother is employed from 36 to 46% in low-income households. In Chile, Martinez and Perticara estimate that free after-school childcare for primary school-age children increased women's employment by 5%. Easing domestic burden of women by switching to labor-saving cooking fuel under Indonesia's conversion to liquefied petroleum gas program also increased female labor force participation. And then making asset ownership by women less visible to others can also help. In a loan disbursement experiment in Uganda, Riley finds that receiving the loan via mobile money led to a higher business profit among female entrepreneurs 8 months later compared to receiving the loan as cash. So as mentioned, giving women more control over their own earned income or loans, or it just helps them propel their business or makes them want to participate in the labor force more. Coordination problem at the workplace. Miller et al. Frame this as a coordination problem wherein low aggregate FLFP in turn causes low demand by firms for female employees. So what am I really saying here? I'm saying that they find evidence that if employees or customers prefer a gender segregated workplace, firms then choose to hire only that gender in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, but not in other regions. Consistent with these regions, gender segregation norms and low FLFP. So gender norms are really playing a role here, because we find this in these settings of Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, where there's higher gender inequalities. So if the firms mostly has men, then they prefer to hire just men, because it'll be then costly to hire women. There's also this narrative that the females in a very male-dominated sphere will distract them from work and will lead to lower profits. So firms with only male workers must pay a fixed cost to gender integrate only if enough women are interested in the job. There are female role models which could also help. So there is this paper by La Fortune et al., which tests two separate add-ons to business trainings in Chile, a 1-hour visit by a successful alumna or a customized tailored consulting, to find that the visit by a role model increased participants' business profits. There's also evidence that providing vocational training and sex education can also help women participate in the labor force and engage in income-generating activities. So this is my last slide. So I have really tried to we have talked about education, rising income, which have explained some part of the decline in the labor force participation and the lack of women's preferred jobs to women. As women get more educated in rural areas, they will have to be paid at least their reservation wage, which is increased over time because of higher education levels. But a large part of the unexplained decline in female labor force participation has to do with tackling gendered social norms. So while social norms around women's work sometimes have economic origins, these norms can persist for a long period after the economic factors are no longer relevant. So what we are seeing is probably the fact that these norms have still prevailed, and these norms are very difficult and sticky. So it will take some years of work for them to change. So how do we really tackle these gender norms? We can provide supporting networks. Erica Field et al. Have studied a 2-day business training program for self-employed women in Ahmedabad in India, and report higher business volume and household income after 4 months when they were invited to bring a friend in the training. So it seems like if you include women as teams or include women's networks or their friends, then they are more likely to participate. There's also we've discussed that women are living in patriarchal setups, which are which are suppressing their labor force participation and autonomy. So shifting attitudes about female employments in families is also crucial. Dean and Jayachandran evaluate an intervention involving a family orientation video addressing safety concerns about teaching jobs. So teaching jobs are female-friendly jobs. So they are talking about the fact that they showed this video to families of women that teaching jobs are female-friendly jobs, and if you have safety concerns about women working, they will be perfectly safe in schools, and these are the measures that we have to ensure the safety of women. But they find no impact on support from family members. So this indicates that even if we do these kind of policies to change the attitude towards women's work to the older generation, which are quite set in their ways, it might be difficult. So therefore, now there is a new interest and new kind of interventions that are taking place, which are the early to shift gender attitudes at a very young age in adolescence. So this Dhar et al. Paper, this evaluated a 2-year program in Haryana's schools teaching girls and boys about gender equality, and it found that the program successfully led to a changing of gender biased views to become more supportive 16% of the time. So there's even in the setup of rural Haryana, these kind of policies might be beneficial, and these are now being scaled to other states as well. Addressing misconception about jobs, about women's work can also help. Burstyn et al. Evaluate that men in Saudi Arabia systematically overestimate their peers' disapproval of women's work. And when researchers provide accurate information to men about their peers' view, their wives are more likely to begin seeking employment. So this just says that sometimes because the patriarchal norms are enforced by individuals, by male members in the household, by female members, senior female members, also by peer networks, by friends. And in this patriarchal setup of Saudi Arabia, they were overestimating their peers' disapproval of women's work. And once they had the true information. Sometimes just providing true information on people's beliefs might be useful. Their wives were more likely to begin seeking employment. So there is a lot of work that can be done in terms of tackling and changing gender norms, which might increase women's labor force participation in the Indian setting as well. Thank you so much. Now I can take some questions.
To turn on. Thank you, Deepshika. I learned so much from this, but I have two announcements before we continue. First, this will take longer than the 1 hour that I had allocated, and that's no problem because I'm also interviewing in the next hour. If that person joins, it's fine. We will continue this discussion till we are done. Okay, so that's the first announcement. Second, I want to welcome Sumaira Wasim. She's a lawyer from Pakistan. I asked her to join as an observer. This is my effort to create links between young people in what I have now come to call as the Desi 8 countries. The Desi 8 countries are Bhutan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and thanks to Sumaira's insistence, Maldives, which I now call as BibSnap plus M. This is the new. I hate the term South Asia because nobody I know feels South Asian. We all feel Desi. So I thought we will start an experiment by asking somebody from one of the Desi 8 countries to be a participant here as an observer. And let's ask her to speak after Gurushri has spoken. So before questions, it's time for the designated discussants. Maybe we can stop sharing the screen, Deepshika, so that we can see everybody. All right, fine. So let's go with the designated discussants as laid out earlier. Please, let's go. Anshika, I think you are at the top, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes,
please, yes.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you so much, Deepshika, for this comprehensive presentation. I think it included most of the factors that actually affects the the employment of female labor force, and in real life, there's a mix of all these factors in an individual's life, which causes lack of employment. So what I believe is the fact that the awareness that everyone has the right and the responsibility to gain economic independence. So no matter if, if even if the male member believes that the female has the right to gain economic independence, the person would be more acceptable for her joining the workforce in both uh, the office and as well as in household, in their own houses. They more have a welcoming nature towards women working in the workforce. Apart from that, the factor that safety is a very important issue while talking about employability. Women tend to not uh, go for opportunities which is far away from their home, which requires longer travel duration or includes migration to a new state because of safety concerns. So I believe these factors actually really impacts the decision making of their career prospects. What course they would choose, what job would they do. There was a word called female friendly jobs. So I guess the word in itself creates a lot of biasness. Like these are the things that women should pursue or that women are allowed to go for. But in fact, women are capable of doing a lot more without the biases if if the right kind of support are provided to them to dismiss these kind of biases. So yes, that's what I want.
Okay, thank you. Yashveer, I think you are second, right?
Thank you, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
So I wanted to ask a question like starting off presentation, it's such a perfect presentation. It gave us all the information about the low participation of women in Indian market. I want to ask a question like you said decline in job participation was driven by non-participation of women from rural areas. But according to me, I think the, the participation is divided into two ways, post-primary education or pre-primary education. Why, according to your research, what was the reason that it is driven, the less participation is driven by rural women?
So that's a question for you.
Okay, should I answer this?
Yeah,
So
please.
no,
Yeah.
the graph that I showed you, the overall female labor force participation rates have been declining in India. And when we look at it based on rural and urban areas, we find that the decline is more, or the decline is coming from rural women. So that's why, so it's just something that we find in the data. So, and we are finding it from multiple data sources. So we have to believe the data and that this is coming from rural areas. And then I went on to tell you that why do we think that this is happening in rural areas despite increases in education. So there has been an increase in education in the last 20 years for both rural and urban girls and women. So why is it that we are still seeing a decline? It seems that there is, so that's why I was using that there's higher non-participation, because it's just something that we see in the data. And then it seems that women are not getting their preferred jobs, and they also have to tend to their domestic care responsibilities. So I hope that answers your questions, along with the other factors that I mentioned.
So it comes down to a really nice paper written by Greece and Guzzer, I think, in 1996. They also said like women who are from higher educational background are getting less job in India. Uh, but according to that paper, they found out women from who are less educated in rural area in India, they are actually taking more jobs than women who are more educated. The reason behind that was the cultural norm, as you said. Uh, the women who are from ST, SC, OBC categories, they don't have that much strong cultural norms. So they tend to take all the labor works. They involve into like workforce a lot. Then women who have high societal norms, or we say socioeconomic norms. So they also I want to add this, like they also came out to conclusion that educated women marry educated men and who have higher income. And this was such a statement that they said since high income families have lesser need for women to work, uh, they contribute to their household work rather than encouraging women to work in a workforce. So it leads to women withdrawal from labor force. Also, women education is in itself is a function of a high socioeconomic status of a family. Uh, in a way, so it got divided into two parts. Women who are coming from low social background and who are coming from higher social background. And then India is facing a problem which is at macro scale and which is at micro scale. At macro scale, there are less white collar jobs that women want with higher education. At micro level jobs, we have cultural and social norms. So women are facing double down these restriction effect in India. Since they can't join labor forces as a daily wage laborer since they have higher education, and the women who have higher education, they are either fighting from social norms or either they don't want to work in an unorganized sector. There is a high demand for formal jobs. I think so. But you summed up it really well. Thank you for taking question. I would pass to next.
Yashveer, for your question, and Anshika also. So what is happening now in rural areas is there's mechanization of agriculture also. So that is leading to preference of men to do those jobs. So that is also suppressing the rural female labor force. So, and the increase in education has been across all socioeconomic, caste, religious groups. So that's also, yeah.
Very much surprising fact that I came across few days ago at Ashoka University. A PhD student was discussing his thesis that men who are moving out for searching for jobs in those areas, in those districts, women are taking more agrarian jobs. And women are coming into farming scene and farming job market mode where men are moving out. So migration is also providing more women opportunities to work as in laborers. Or either a lot of women labor workforce participation depend on educational level of village and that particular regional area. So if that particular regional area have higher education background or higher education level, the woman tends to work, participate in labor force more in that area than compared to area where they have less educational level. So yeah,
Out-migration
that
has
yeah.
been leading to
Uh,
women
and
agriculture
also,
for
I also agree with you all point the role of role models. Women with uh, political leader in their villages or areas tend to work more, contribute more to workforce rather than women where there are no political leaders or what's it, gram pradhans or particular local leaders in that area. There the women participation rate is really low. Yeah. So I agree with all of your point that your presentation was perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yashveer, Abhik, it's your turn.
Thank you, Professor Mathur. As always, I learn a lot from Deepshika working with her, and today the presentation itself was amazing. It covered a wide array of topics that we have worked on, and some more that I'm still learning about. While I heard everybody's points, and it's really interesting that everybody's talking about the restrictions on the supply side, I might probably bring it down to a more micro event that, well, a large event, but a micro event in the long history of declining female labor force participation. I'm just curious that I saw that the urban salaried women specifically, there was a downtick because of the COVID-19 crisis, like in 2021, like maybe a lagged effect of the lockdown. I'm just curious, like while there is supply side challenges in terms of women entering the labor force, uh, is there sort of any evidence on like women sustaining in the labor force, especially if there is, like we know that in India specifically, studies have found that women are more likely to be suffering from negative mental health outcomes like depression and anxiety. So I'm just curious if there's any evidence of that playing a role in high attrition um, in like the formal labor force, even if not the informal labor force. Question for Deepshika.
Oh, that's a great question because that's the topic of my next paper. And I don't know, I don't think Abhik you're aware of this, but I'm trying to do a project on RCT in call centers in India to understand that giving mental health support, whether it will retain young female workers or not. Because these are young workers between 18 to 25 years of age. So as you have rightly mentioned, I think we really need to now study what will retain the workers that are already there, because women seem to be entering and exiting the workforce and work as reserve workers, especially during these crises. So what will really retain workers? And call center jobs are part of the service sector industry, which needs more work on. So yeah, I will tell you the answer in a couple of years.
Okay. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. I think Mannat is next. It was supposed, Professor Dalvi, we are running over time in our previous talk. I will come back to you. Can you please join us after 30 minutes, or you can watch this if you want. It's a very interesting talk on women's participation in labor force. We can come back to you. I'll come back to you maybe in half an hour. Otherwise, you can stay. So anyway, it's his choice. He's a professor of chemical engineering in Mumbai. Very interesting person. But for the moment, Mannat.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Deepshika ma'am. I think this was a very comprehensive deck, and it just laid out all the points, all the recommendations. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Coming to some of the points that I would like to add. At Nicole Associates, this female labor force participation has actually been our favorite topic. For the last 4 years, we have extensively analyzed labor PLFS data, which is the Periodic Labor Force Survey data, which is released annually by the Government of India. And we've tried to understand the trends in labor force market. And apart from this, over the last 4 years, we've also conducted more than 100 consultations with women-led organizations and women-owned businesses to understand what was the impact of the pandemic on their workforce, and to understand whether the pandemic disproportionately affected them, or if it did affect them disproportionately, what were the factors that led to that particular loss and gain. So these are some of the key areas that we have been working on, and this has been our favorite topic, like I said. So our research findings have been published in several international journals like Springer, Link, Springer Publication, Journal of International Women's Studies, and I would love to share the links right now after my speech, so you all can go through it, and please feel free to text me or like message me on WhatsApp, on LinkedIn, and we can definitely have a discussion that way. Now coming on to some of the points that I would like to add to it. So when we were actually looking at the trends in labor force, one very startling trend which I would just like to talk about, which Deepshika ma'am briefly touched upon as well, is that when you plot the LFPR, which is labor force participation rate data, on one graph for females and males, I can share my screen also for that, but I would just like to just show it to you like this. You will see that the difference between the proportion of men and women in the labor force has remained at about 40 percentage points. So in about 1987, it was 47% for females and it was 92% for males. And then, like ma'am clearly pointed out, it fell down to about 23% in 2017. I'm talking about 15 years and above. So there might be some discrepancy. And it fell down to 80% for men. And right now also it's about 32.8% for females and about 77% for males. So you see the difference has constantly been at about 40 percentage points. So we at NA, we were like at Nicole Associates, we were like trying to understand what are the factors. And like ma'am clearly mentioned, these are some of the factors. There are just some more factors that I would like to talk about. Like the first one was occupational segregation. Then the second one was social norms, increased mechanization. So talking about social norms, I just want to add one point about unpaid care work. So we've also extensively analyzed the time use survey data, which was published by the Government of India in 2019. And over there, what we found out was that Indian women are 8 times more likely to perform unpaid care work compared to men. And this difference, this particular statistic remains the same regardless of the education that you've done, regardless of whether you're married or not, or regardless whether you're in the labor force or not. You will, as a woman, just because you're a woman, you will continue to perform more work than your male counterparts. So this is something that we really need to keep in mind when we're trying to understand what are the factors that lead to women falling out of the labor force. 2 factors that I would like to talk about. The first one is mobility restrictions. So, which I think somebody also Anshika briefly touched upon that. So what we need to talk about mobility restrictions is that the lack of availability, first of all, secondly, accessible, and thirdly, affordable public transportation severely restricts women's participation in the labor force. So what happens, and this is actually and this is exacerbated by the fact that, every woman feels unsafe when you're traveling in public transport, or even social norms, or like, curfew restrictions. Like, you're as a woman, you're not allowed to step out of the house after 7 p.m., after 8 p.m. So in our discussions with college students, we had like a focus group discussion with college students, and we were so surprised to know that every single woman in that group of 30 girls, every single woman had been a victim of sexual harassment, whether it was sexual, whether it was verbal. Every woman was a victim of that. And some of them also said that just because of curfew restrictions, or just because the internship or the work location was far away from their house or from their PG locations, they decided to give up that particular opportunity. So, because of curfew restrictions, because of timings and everything, these are some of the reasons why women are not even taking up internship opportunities, let alone talking about work opportunities. So this is also another factor which we need to keep in mind. And women also are imposed something known as pink tax, which I want to talk about. So pink tax means that, just because you're a woman, you would prefer to like travel in a safer mode of transportation, right? If I am traveling back home at 10 p.m., I would rather take a cab than take a bus or a train or a metro. And because of that, I would end up paying more money in a cab, right? So this is known as pink tax. And in our discussion with, we actually spoke to rural women in Junavas, which is a small area located in Haryana. We spoke to 7-8 women over there, and they told us that Junavas is 10 kilometers away from Rewari. Rewari is also a place in Haryana. They said that the men over there pay rupees 10 every day to travel from Junavas to Rewari, but the women have to pay rupees 20. And why is that? Because in 1 week, women probably travel once or twice, maybe they they might have to go to the market, they might have to go to the hospital. But because they are not frequent travelers of public transportation, they have to pay more. So, just because, and whereas men, because they travel every day, they just have to pay rupees 10. So the imposition of a pink tax is also something that women are a victim of. That's the first factor that I wanted to point out. And the second one, which is the gender digital divide, that is also the primary barrier to why women are not participating in the labor force, which was actually exacerbated during the pandemic. And this manifests into a triple disadvantage, which is something that we've also spoken about in our paper, which got recently published 2-3 months ago in ID for Change. So we've said that there are 3 particular reasons. First is your rural-urban divide. Now, the rural broadband penetration is about 29% against a national average of 51%. This is, I'm talking about India. And over here, you need to understand that even in rural areas, which is, this is actually pointed out by the NFHS 5 data, that women in rural areas are less likely to own a mobile phone. In fact, when you talk about the national average, Indian women are 15% less likely to own a mobile phone and 33% less likely to use internet services. This is 2022 data from GSMA. And, so this is the first point that I want to talk about, the rural-urban divide. The second point is the income-based digital divide, which means that because internet usage or because data packs are so expensive, you will not be able to purchase, you will not be able to afford it. And lastly, again, coming down to social norms and intra-household discrimination, wherein families, like even during the pandemic, so in our discussions with some NGOs, we got to know that families, if they have one mobile phone, during the pandemic, everything was online. So they would prefer giving that mobile phone to their sons and not to the daughters. That's because they were like, no, the son has to study, the girl need not study. So these are just some of the factors which also contribute to why women are not in the labor force and why women are falling out of the labor force. I'll be happy to talk more about our research, and I will be sharing the links as well. So once again, thank you so much, Deepshika ma'am. Just 1 or 2 points that I wanted to add. Thank you so much. And also one more thing, just one last thing. I wanted to talk about the pink buses. In fact, I saw that picture that it was there in your presentation. So, we had a discussion with some of the household, servants, women workers who were working in Southex over there. And we spoke to them and they told us, and this is also a paper that has just been released recently by Greenpeace. I'll share that paper link also. They said that, why women, if you give free tickets to women to go and commute in buses, that will actually increase the labor force participation rate. But what we are noticing is that women are subjected to harassment. The bus drivers are not stopping for women. So, as first of all, the buses will not stop for you. If you're waiting over there, they know because you're free. You're a free rider. They will not stop for you. So because of that, women have to wait for longer duration just to get access to the bus. And even when they get onto the bus, then also they're being ridiculed, they're being harassed, just because they're free riders.
Mhm.
So, this is something that's been pointing out. I will also share the link of that paper. Happy to discuss further. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mannat, for standing in at the last minute. She just sent me an email about 1.5 hours ago saying that Mitali is stuck in rural Nepal. And what can I do? I said, well, you are an expert. So thank you so much. Gurushri, are you ready?
Yeah.
Taking notes? All right.
No, yeah, I was trying to
Yeah.
make my brain comprehend the wide variety of data that's been put together. And really, congratulations. It's an excellent presentation and paper. Okay, here are some questions I have. According to Golden, and we've talked about this, you said that it's a U-shaped curve, and we have gone down for a while, but now hopefully it'll rise because it's related to income, right? It's labor force participation is related to income or per capita income or whatever. But that is the positive effect of income growth. But in India, as you pointed out, social norms can reduce that effect or restrict the effect of income growth. I was a bit confused about the evidence presented in this by Deepshika. do social norms become less, here's the question. Do social norms become less restrictive with income growth? What is the evidence in India? In other words, as India's per capita income grows and, wages and opportunities grow, will social norms become less restrictive? I read the paper rather late last night, and I thought there was very mixed evidence. In the beginning, the evidence was that yes, that there's the impact of growth of the economy and all that, which is positive on social norms and on things like male superiority and less bargaining power. I thought I saw some positive evidence, but then you seem to say today that that's not the case. It's not happening in India. So I'd like a little more clarification on that. But I agree with you that social norms, that paternal dominance and all that are terribly, terribly strong in India. I remember this was some years ago, but I was discussing in a focal group that we were doing a work on female workforce and domestic violence. And this focus group was they were all working. They were all working women, but their husbands often beat them, treated them badly. And I asked them, I said, how come you can take care of yourself? Why do you let these men into your lives? And they said, well, they looked very coy and said, well, they are our husbands after all. We can't throw them out. So it's not just that the men impose their rules on women, but women also seem to feel that this is the way life is, and I can't throw out my husband. So I just want to focus on, would like to know what you think, Deepshika and the others, about the future of this very strong social norms that we seem to have in India. Some other minor points. That's my major question.
So let's have the answer to that, Gurushri, before we come to your minor points.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm sure they are eager to answer. So let's have the
I
answer.
bet. I would love to hear. Yes.
Yeah. Deepshika,
So,
please.
thank you so much,
Gurushri.
for the question. Thank you so much. So what I was trying to show is that what has been observed in the world and what has been hypothesized is a U-shaped relationship between income or economic development and female labor force participation.
Mm-hmm.
We have, however, not seen that, because what we have seen is that the GDP growth rate has been high in the last 20 years. We have been seeing an increase in GDP growth rates, but we are not seeing a rise in female labor force participation.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we are seeing a decline.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that can happen initially with an increase in income. So yes, so we are on a decline right now, but for us to go back, we'll have to provide, as I was mentioning, we will have to provide jobs which are suitable for women in the sense that they are flexible, because there's enough evidence to show that women care for flexible jobs, which allows them to manage their home care responsibilities also. Because in the US and in other countries, living closer to their mother or mother-in-law means childcare transfers. In India, it means that enforcement of patriarchal norms. So the setups are very different. So that's why this is it is very interesting to study women's work in the Indian context or in the context of Pakistan or Bangladesh, because there are these, not in Bangladesh very much so, but we have these gender norms or gender inequality or gender discrimination at play, which may not lead lead to an uptick in female labor force participation. When male incomes are rising, women are withdrawing from the labor market, and even though they want to go to work, either they don't have the preferred job, they don't have safe commutes, they don't have so they don't have they don't have the family's support. So what I was mentioning towards the end is that we will need to tackle these gender norms, as we all think they are important to take care of before we can imagine that women will go back into the labor force, is that we need to change these gender norms. And how do we change them? There have been efforts to change these patriarchal norms in the older generation by showing them that these jobs are safer for women. And I was mentioning female friendly in quotations, the fact that it is, only in quotations, that according to the society, they are female friendly. Of course, women can do whatever and achieve great heights. But the fact that these are, even teaching jobs, there's so much convincing that needs to be done because of the household structure that we live in. So all these problems are so entwined. The fact that there's patriarchality here, where a daughter-in-law is a new entrant in an already set household, and there's son preference, as we've all discussed. So this is, as we are discussing, I'm really realizing, I mean, this is great, because we are seeing that we are kind of complementing each other in many ways in our views and opinions and readings of the literature and our own personal experience, that it is the social norms angle and the fact that we need to create more flexible jobs. The Rajasthan government has announced creation of 20,000 jobs for women to work from home. Now, it's a geographically challenged state where a lot of it is in the Thar Desert, where there are no jobs really that can be provided there. So in such settings, and where women are allowed to go out, we have to provide work from home job options. So we have to be very creative in order to bring women to the workforce. Providing a safe commute is one thing that has worked, but since we have a panelist from Pakistan, I was showing that pink bus actually from this project in Lahore, and where they provided buses for commute to women. But it did not work very well because they only provided certain hours. So women only could reach the office but could never come back, use the same opportunity to come back. So these policies have to be created possibly by women, because here there are men who are decision makers, you see. So they have to be crafted more carefully, have to be piloted, and the benefits should be tested out. There should be some kind of impact assessment before rolling out these policies generally. So yeah, those are some points that I hope. So I don't have any clear answer to you. There does not seem to be, since we are not on that on the uptick, so we can't really say that we are following that U-shaped yet. We are really at the beginning, so we can't really say anything right now.
I just thought, as I read your paper in the beginning, you seem to say that some studies at least show a greater bargaining power for women who work, but then we say that, but it's so strong that bargaining power doesn't work. So it's very tough. It's very tough to answer that question. But thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Deepshika, please.
I was just mentioning that for women who work, so there are a lot of them who are not working, right? So women who work, their bargaining power is higher. So there have been
studies. It is higher in India.
So somebody was saying, and if we, so yes, of course, even when we think about it intuitively, throughout my presentation, I was citing mostly causal evidence or evidence which is generally accepted or published in a very good journal. So that was, therefore, a lot of the papers, a lot of, I haven't spoken a lot of the gender norms that are prevalent, because we were talking mostly, as an economist, I was going for evidence which has been proven. So in terms of income being related to gender bargaining power, there was a paper in Mexico which found that when we think of trade policies, because we were talking about export trade policies as well, there were some trade policies which an exogenous or an external trade policy which increased the demand for jobs where women were employed more. So which meant that women were employed more means women are working, are getting more income then. And that when they looked at the rise, the comparison with or association with bargaining power, then they found that yes, after the increase in these jobs or demand for women-dominated jobs, there was an increase in bargaining power. So this is a kind of a causal evidence which shows that, look, with an increase in jobs for women, there will be, women working, there will be higher bargaining power. So that really clearly lays out the link between women's workforce or earned income and their bargaining power and decision making. And the point that I was why do we want women to work? So we all have been talking about that.
No problem with that. But are there such studies in India to show that bargaining power increases?
There is a descriptive evidence in the setting of Uttar Pradesh, where they showed that women who are working more are also higher, of like greater freedom to make their own decisions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's give a chance. Yashveer, let's give a chance to Sumaira to pop in. And I have invited her as an observer because she doesn't know the details of India. But let's hear from her.
Yeah. I don't want to take more. I'll take 1 minute more. I just want to just emphasize.
Sure.
What I wanted to say is that, the male participation rate is always higher than women's. Even in the United States, it's almost 89% for men and 57% for women. I'm not asking for a discussion. Second, lack of skills is true for men too. They have the same problem. And finally, I'm glad this paper focuses on why women don't participate. Lots of studies get really very engaged with the gender gap, and that's not important really at this stage. Let's first start with whether they can, why they are not working. But still, on the whole, I think there is conflicting data in how solid do you think this labor force participation data is? Okay, I'm done.
All right. Deepshika, can you respond to the last question, please? How solid is the data? Because I have no faith in the data, honestly.
Oh really?
Because it's coming from a model. It's not, I mean, there are surveys.
A model? They come from surveys.
No, they don't. The World Bank data is not from a survey. The World Bank data is from an ILO model, as far as I know. But
no. But they have used survey data from the National Family Planning.
That's real data.
The data they have used is real data.
True. Yeah. So anyway, I'm no expert. Let's hear from Deepshika.
Okay.
But the labor force participation rates we are seeing in NSS, PLFS, IHDS is almost similar, and we are finding a decline. So this is something it's consistent in all.
Okay, let's give Sumaira her shot at it. Thank you so much for coming, and let's hear from you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Professor. And thank you so much, Ms. Batheja. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. I am a bit familiar with India's landscape because I did work with the University of Pennsylvania with the TTCS think tank project. And so I am a little bit aware of that. Also, I work with many of my Indian fellows in CCS, and I also work with Swadhantra Center. So I am a bit familiar on that. I just have one question. So you did mention about, so there was a statement about women opening up bank accounts, but I just wanted to know how well they were able to maintain those bank accounts, because I do understand that they're restricted in their financial decisions, and that also does stifle their entrepreneurial spirit. So I just needed to know, because we don't really have enough data on that as far as Pakistan is concerned. So I just wanted to know if there's any data on how, or if women are able to maintain those bank accounts as actively as they would hope.
Deepshika?
Yes. This was a study done in a very big state in India of Madhya Pradesh, and this was in collaboration with the government. So all the women who were working in the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Guarantees Employment Scheme, so there's guaranteed employment to people in India for at least 100 days in a year. So women who were working in those in those schemes, they were given their own bank account. So there were bank accounts which were created for them. So this was a randomized control trials. For some women, there were bank accounts that were created. They were taught financial or digital literacy. They were taught how to maintain and use their bank accounts. And we found that that women who learned how to use their bank accounts, they wanted to work in this scheme more. So basically, this was about retaining female in the labor force mostly, and the mechanism was the fact that they own their own money now. So this is data which is generated, which is collected by these economists who conducted the study. So I can share that paper with you all. It's a pretty remarkable finding. Yeah.
Okay, good. Anything else, Sumaira?
No, that was all. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we have really run out of time. So let me conclude first of all, I've learned a lot, and that's very important to always learn. And let me see if I can give a little bit of a very brief summary, okay, looking at it from a helicopter view. I think the first point is that India's economy has structurally changed and modernized, but society has not caught up. Society has not caught up. In fact, some of the worst traditional norms have been reinforced, though the point was not made here. Implicitly, we find that in Haryana, you mentioned the sex ratio is awful, but that's because people can now enforce the older norms more rigorously because they can do sonograms. Okay, so the rise of income actually reinforces the older social norms. In some cases here, the social norms have been relaxed, but in other cases, they have not. Further, the transformation of the economy you mentioned into the services sector, the transformation of the economy has not thrown up jobs that women would like to take given the old social norms. Okay, so the women they've been dealt a good deal because their men make more money, but they have not been dealt a good deal because the jobs created are not the kinds that they prefer based on ancient and sustaining social norms. So they don't create so you get, whether to call it a demand side or a supply side, it's a joint thing, that there's enough money in the family. Why should I work? Why should you work? Because the social norms are reinforced by economic progress. So it's really the structural change. As yesterday, we had Professor Raghavendra Jha. He talked a lot about the shift to the services economy since the 1991 reforms. And services, of course, includes software and also includes the informal sector. Working in the informal sector, women do work as street vendors and so on, but that's not. Anyway, so this is just my summary, that the interplay between the modernization and transformation of the economy and the social norms is such that the outcome, for whatever reasons that you can find in the interplay, is that the labor force participation rate of Indian women has fallen. And that may explain why, if this structural change has not taken place in our neighboring countries, then they may not have seen that decline, because women continue to do what they used to do. But now in India, those opportunities are less, and the new opportunities are such that either they don't need to take it because their husbands make enough money, or they can't take it for whatever reasons that have been discussed here. So thank you so much. As usual, I need to give Deepshika the last word because she's the speaker. So Deepshika, please conclude.
I would like to thank you for your closing remarks. They really summarized what I presented. And thanks to each and every one of you for your time. I'm sorry we went a little overboard with the discussion and the presentation, but I think we covered a lot today, and the discussion was very rich. So I really appreciate your time and your effort. Thank you so much.
And I
wait, I have to ask this. Where can I get the graphs? I could not get them out of your paper. Deepshika.
Your graphs.
My graphs, you want me to share?
The ones you presented today, they were, it said figure 1, figure 2, but I couldn't find them in the paper that.
Well, she can just share her PowerPoint with us. Please share the PowerPoint.
Not from, slides were not from any one paper.
So just send us the slides. You didn't send us the slides. Please send us the PowerPoint or the PDF or whatever.
Yeah, thank you.
To the group, and we will have it. I want to thank the discussants. This is a very novel experiment that I thought of for no good reason, that we should empower the young people so that they can come and actually speak. And I had no idea what they would say or whether they would even do anything useful. But it validates the thought that we should empower young people to give them the chance to come and speak, and not just ask questions, but also know in advance what the topic is, and that they would have a slot. And I'm very keen now to have future speakers come with young people in the designated slots as speakers, so that and I hope that other people also copy that. Well, let's end it here. Professor Dalvi is waiting eagerly, but I need a 5-minute break and then I'll come back to you. And in the meantime, I have to tell the person who's after him that we are running 30 minutes late. Thank you all. Thank you, Sumaira, especially for coming here and listening to us. And okay, let's end this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you. Bye.